Hello everyone, my name is Julie Hollinger and I'm the Programs Manager at the Petawawa Military Family Resource Center, and I want to welcome you to our very first session of Transition 101. Transition 101 is an idea that was brought up by Louise Anderson, our VFP coordinator, and her idea was to share information with the families of members who are releasing. Oftentimes members are releasing, they have an opportunity to go to meetings, they have an opportunity to go to briefings and sit down with different folks and ask their questions. But oftentimes what Louise found was that when family members came into the process, that they weren't getting that information directly, and they felt that if they had more information, that perhaps it would make a difference for them and for their family. So she came up with this series. The first session that we're doing today, we're going to be talking about emotional changes and things that are happening within the family that you may or may not have thought of before the process starts. As with everything in the military, there's always going to be some surprises that end up popping up. So we want to make sure that we can maybe demystify the process a little bit more, and the more information you have, the more you're prepared for. Before we start, I'm going to let our two guests introduce themselves. Let's start with Louise, because this was her idea. Louise, do you want to introduce yourself and talk a bit about what you do?
Absolutely. My name is Louise, of course, and I'm the Veteran Family Program Coordinator with the Petawawa Military Family Resource Center. My job is enhanced information and referral, social support, and I think of myself as a bridge. So I'm here to help in any way that you need me to help with respect to the transition process. I'm here to bridge the military life to the civilian life and make things a little bit easier for you. And that can look like however you need it to look. It's not etched in stone. Every family is going to be unique, and their needs are also going to be unique. So what you need from me will be different than what the next person needs from me, but I'm here to help you get those needs taken care of.
So the services that you provide to families, it's different from family to family. And before we should move on, maybe we should just mention the fact that the Veteran Family Program is a program that is sponsored by Veterans Affairs Canada. It's a VAC program, and it is implemented by Military Family Services. And there is a VFP coordinator like Louise, well, different than Louise, but providing a similar function in MFRCs across the country. The VFP program was introduced in April of 2019. In Petawawa. Going back way before April 2019 is the Family Liaison Program, and CJ has been a Family Liaison Officer with the PMFRC for some time. CJ, do you want to introduce yourself and talk about what you do as a flow?
Absolutely, thank you. So my name's CJ. I've been a Family Liaison Officer here at the PMFRC in Petawawa since 2012. I'm currently one of three. We started off with one, then we went to two in 2012, and in 2016 we went to 3 family liaison officers to be able to meet the demand for that sort of counseling and therapy here locally in Petawawa. So my role as a family liaison officer is to provide mental health services to the spouses and children of ill, injured, and deceased soldiers. So you can imagine over the past 8 years the amount of medical releases that have gone through the system for ill and injured soldiers. From the services of the flow, but when the families were aware of the services, we try to accompany them through this very important process that is transition.
Thank you, CJ. I appreciate that. So those are our two experts that we have here, and I'm just going to be the person who is asking questions in the background and throwing over to these two ladies as we go through. Louise, let's start with you. You've been in this position since April 2019, so you're in a little bit more than a year, and you've had a chance to talk with a number of families. From your perspective, and maybe from what you've seen so far, what are the difficulties that you would like to talk to families about, like, that you would like them to expect, or maybe know that they may be popping up on the horizon?
Every transition is going to be unique to the family or the individual who's going through it. There's so many factors that can affect this journey. It can be a difficult journey, even if it's wanted or planned for. But if it's something that comes up unexpectedly or is not wanted, it can complicate things greatly. So there are many emotions that can be experienced at this time. Some are positive and some are less so. Some of the positive emotions could possibly be anticipation, hope, make peace with it. There can be some mixture of not as positive emotions that can lead to feelings of being quite other emotions that could be felt would be there's a feeling of loss, a bereavement for your military career and the culture, not being understood by the civilian world. Don't have the same work ethic as you, they don't have the same culture or mores. You may have feelings of not knowing yourself anymore. Who am I now? I'm not a soldier. You could feel a loss of camaraderie. You may fear for the unknown or the future. You may find that the work that you're doing as a civilian not as fulfilling as the work you did as a soldier. You may become annoyed with trivial family matters, still a lack of control. There could be financial worries, anxiety or generalized anxiety and worries about things. You might want to be alone. You might not feel valued anymore. Possible that you could feel a loss of identity or purpose and feeling inadequate. Those are just some of the things that can come up, and they may not be relevant to to a person, but somebody may feel a whole combination of these feelings as well. So
as we've talked over the years, one of the things that always strikes me is the fact that there's no formula or one size fits all, because everyone's career is so different. Some people have been in for a couple of 4 or 5 years. Some people have been in for 20. Some people have moved around a lot. Some people have been in one place. Some people are happy about leaving, like they think they're excited about the next phase. Some people aren't as much. So there's no one size fits all kind of solution. And that's where these programs come in, because it allows you to sort of tailor the experience and ask for the services that you need.
And help people to understand what could be expected, right? And again, like you said, it's unique to everyone, but if you have an idea of what you may come up against, then you'll be ready for it. It's not going to blindside you.
Louise, you talked a lot about some of the things that the member might be experiencing, but CJ, you spend a lot of time with the families. And things don't happen in isolation. So what are the kinds of things that you see families dealing with when you see the member going through a release process?
Right. So before I talk about the family, I'm just going to put the transition, the medical release transition in perspective to explain how that impacts the family. So first of all, we have to be real. Medical release is not a voluntary release. So when that's compounded with anxiety, depression, and various degrees of severity of OSIs, operational stress injuries, AKA down the road PTSD, the greater those are present, the greater the impact on the family. So when a soldier goes through medical release, it's usually not by choice. So that puts a different spin on the release process and transition itself, okay? The ones that transition well, who have no issues with the process, we don't see. It's usually the families that are struggling through that process that eventually get referred to the family liaison officer. So when a soldier has planned to have a career in the forces and all of a sudden, because of conditions of service or not, health-related issues they're no longer able to meet service requirements. You can imagine what that kind of reception of news can have on a soldier. And of course, he or she takes that home. So what affects the soldier affects the whole family because they work as a system, okay? In my experience over the past 8 years working with families that are medically releasing and transitioning to the civilian world, I would have to identify that the fear of the unknown and income insecurity have affected family dynamics in the biggest way. And often the spouses that are usually women, I've had male spouses of female soldiers as well, but the female spouses of soldiers that were transitioning, their biggest concern is not knowing what's going to happen because they don't have that information. So working out of the CAF-TC has been wonderful in the sense that I can pull a client service rep right there. I can go to any of the one doors that are open to bring that client service rep in and let the spouse ask all the questions that they need to know about what's going to happen after. Okay, so again, the fear of the unknown, what's going to happen, where are we going to live, how are we going to pay for all of this, are at the top of some of the, and they're all manageable, but they don't know that at that time. So there's a lot of anxiety, like Louise said, related to the unknown. So that has been my experience.
I just want to take a quick step back because I think just one thing that I want to sort of clarify. We've been talking about using the word family a lot. Can we just talk about what that means? Because I think a lot of people have a definition of a family means I have to be married to a person and my individual children. But I know that when you people are talking about family, it's a much broader definition. So I want to make sure that people understand that even if they don't fit into that formula, that there is still support and there's still assistance for them with those programs. Louise, do you just want to talk about what your definition of a family is?
My definition of a family is your definition of a family. So however you define your family is how we define your family. So yeah, it's not, we don't hold it within the formal constraints of what society sees as a family. You define the family.
Because I think that's a really important point. Please don't think that just because maybe you're not married or, you know, that's not a barrier. We will work with you and we can talk to you about that. One of the things that I've been talking to about in all the fireside chats that we've been doing is, and this has been a universal message, is we would rather have you call us and ask the question than sit there and think that, you know, it doesn't apply to me and not get the support that you need. We would rather have you call us so we can help you than sort of sit back because you think you're bothering us, because you're not.
Absolutely. And the other point that I want to make is that if you are no longer with your medically released partner, you can still access my services. That is not a barrier either.
And the other thing I just want to talk about for your service specifically, Louise, and I'm not sure about CJ, does it matter how long you've been out of the service?
No, there's no time limits anymore.
So if somebody has gone through a medical release 5 years, 10 years ago, you can still reach out and you can still reach out to Louise and she can hook you up through these services and in through the services that CJ provides. Louise, can you talk to us a little bit about those 3 stages of change in the medical release?
Okay, everybody's going to, just putting it out there, everybody's going to experience these changes differently. They may be orders, but stage 1 generally is facing the inevitability of the change. So this stage has some activities that might be helpful. Do your transition planning. Take courses offered by the CAF-TC and think about your future goals. You can develop your knowledge about how civilian society functions, obviously depending on how long you've been in. Civilian life and work may differ, and you may have different feelings of satisfaction. So stay positive. Tap into mutual support within the family unit. It's important that service members and their families don't shoulder the burden of change all by themselves in isolation. The whole family is involved in this, and you can turn to each other for support. Talk about the changes. Sometimes it's a lot less daunting and frightening if you're talking about them and you put those things out there. Understand the release process and the support that you're entitled to. There's a lot out there. You just need to understand. So ask. You can pick up the phone and call me, or email me right now is probably easier. And I can help you with that. I might not know the answers, but I can certainly tap into someone who does. Mark your departure with an event that allows you to move on. I know within the military, they have a Depart with Dignity. Take advantage of that. I'm not sure that they're doing it right now, but at a future date when we're all allowed to be, you know, closer to each other and gathering groups, that's an important to do. And I know historically people who have not wanted to do it, but then did, felt so much better after, because it is almost Just adjusting back to civilian life can take some time, and be patient with yourself and understanding, and within the family unit as well. Stage 2 is revolving around breaking with the old life, and that consists of mental and emotional adjustments. So adjust back to civilian life can take time, so be patient and understanding. Again, it is a process and patience is required. A feeling of insecurity is perfectly natural. You can gain confidence by having a plan to achieve your goal. Like whatever you want to do, you can start by looking at schools, or going to employment service and getting your resume done, or even going to employment service not getting your resume done, but talking about skills that you developed while in the military. The earlier that you prepare for and accept your transition to civilian life, the smoother it can be. In civilian businesses, it can be all about you and what you deliver. So learn again to sell yourself and your skills, and it's make an appointment with employment service, and they can talk to you about how to do interviews and get prepared for the next step. And you don't have to wait till you're out to do that. You can do that while you're still in. And keeping a routine is really good, and being aware and understanding of what everyone is going through, it can be very helpful. And stage 3 is building and committing to a new life, which consists of finding your place in the civilian society. So be flexible, review your plans regularly, and be realistic. Nothing is etched in stone. There are always roads to a destination. So if one road has a roadblock, go around it, over it, up, side it. There's ways of doing it. Use your personal and military qualities in the civilian workplace. The civilian workplace values your work ethic. They value your knowledge. They value your sense of team. They value your sense of, so that's an important thing to remember and take with you. And the relationship with your civilian work colleagues may not be as close and supportive as you're used to within your military family, but you can still develop that sense of closeness. It's just different, and it takes time. And everyone, like I said before, will go through these stages at a different pace, or maybe even in a different order.
I think it's an important point. That's not like a linear phase 1, phase 2. You might be coming back and forth to things again
Absolutely.
and again. CJ, do you want to talk about what's going on internally for folks as they're going through with this change?
Okay, sure. I'm going to have to echo a lot of what Louise has said, because I don't know if people are noticing, but there's the theme that's coming through. And the theme is, on the one side, that medical release, or any kind of release, requires a lot of adjusting and a lot of adapting to new ways of doing things, which involve sometimes grieving, like Louise mentioned, because there's a sense of loss. So you have to adjust and adapt to that. But the other theme that's coming out that's linked to this one is preparation. And there is time. In most cases, medical releases, there's a process. The VFP book shows this beautiful roadmap from beginning of injury to the point of medical release. And I use that tool in the office with clients all the time, because it is a road, it is a journey. And it's a journey that will challenge you, because there's a lot of change. But there are resources. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the fear of the unknown, the financial security are huge pieces. And within both of those, there's a lot of subcategories that unfortunately we don't have time to talk about. But suffice to say that adjusting and adapting are things that will challenge people. As a flow, hence one of my roles, other than to support spouses and children from a mental health perspective, is to try to connect the spouse with the correct services early on in the transition process, because information becomes their power. Okay, so usually after soldiers have signed their disclosure is around the time at which I will start referring people to Louise to get connected earlier on. And I will suggest, I can't control, I can only suggest for spouses to accompany their still serving member to a SCAN seminar, because there's tons of information that comes at them at the SCAN seminar. And the third day is purely related to medical releases. And it's, again, information is power. I will direct people towards the PSO's office, not so much for the spouse, but for the serving soldier, especially if the spouse is coming to me and saying he has or she has no clue what she's going to do after release. Well, hello, we have the services of personnel selection officers for soldiers to help them with exactly that. But often people don't know that they have access to those services. Other than that, I can suggest them to speak with the client or transition rep that's assigned to that previous unit that that soldier belonged to if they're posted to the Joint Personnel Support Unit. And my role becomes then to focus, once all that referral is done, to focus on the spouses and the children's own future planning for where and what they're going to do, and to try to visualize those successes in the future, especially if the medical release involves a move of location and people lose all their landmarks, right? So that's where I come in and join everybody else in making it a successful transition for the family.
So I'm going to ask, get a little bit of roundtable style again, and I'll start with CJ because we just you're on a roll here. We're talking about the change and how change is affecting people. What's your best advice to help people manage that change? And I mean, I think maybe people are a little tired of the word resilience, but you know, by managing that change and having that power, to give them a little bit more resilience and a little bit more strength as they're going through it.
Okay, so most of the families I've worked with, the spouse, the military spouse, was already on a reduced work week. Okay, so the transition has already kind of started even while this member is still serving, because as an ill and injured spouse, a serving member, they may be on a reduced or modified work week. So they are already spending more time at home. So that transition reality is already hitting the family in a big way. Depending on the severity of a disability, transition can be more challenging for the service member, hence for their family, right? You can well imagine if there's limitations in the daily functioning, that affects the house. If you look at a family as a mobile, you know those mobiles above a crib with all those fancy little things hanging? If one member of the family is not able to provide to the normal dynamics and family functioning, that implies that the other members of the family have to kind of pick up, right? So, and that fluctuates with each family member. So if you associate your family to a system that looks a little bit like a mobile, you can understand how the dynamics will be affected. As for advice for couples, because I know that that is a reality, the better the communication, the better the understanding. And the better time at home will be in terms of roles and routines. As I mentioned before, medical release is not a soldier's choice. And this puts a spin on the adjusting and the adaptation that I was talking about. Okay, so yeah, I think that's what I want to say at this point for this question.
Okay, Louise, do you want to talk about strategies that you recommend to people to help them manage that change?
Absolutely. So taking time to reflect and to think on the change and talk as a family about the changes ahead is really important. Planning early and keep on planning as you go is also important. You have to remain flexible and open to change. Control, so be flexible, go with the flow, continue to believe in yourself and your abilities because you have a lot, and try to this becomes an opportunity, and it's important to flip it into that positive way of looking at things. Take advantage of all of the resources that are to you throughout the process, and I can't say that enough. And if you don't know what resources are available, reach out. There's a wealth of them out there. Actively look after your health and your well-being and that of your family. So make sure that everybody's doing okay, frequent check-ins, that kind of thing. Basically required, as well as new skills. So with respect to learning new skills, you also have resources available to help you get those. Be open to listening. Recognize when you're stuck and don't be afraid to ask for help. As soon as you know you need help, reach out and get it. I can't say that enough. As early as possible in the process, reach out for support. It doesn't have to be massive amounts of support. It's just like, you know, somebody's there in your corner when you need them. I think that's a really important piece.
So wherever you're watching this video, we are going to make sure that the caption or the introduction at the top includes Louise's email address. So if you don't know where to start for reaching out for that help, reach out to Louise. If you are not from the Petawawa area, if you're from somewhere else, reach out to Louise anyway, and she's going to be able to tell you who is the closest VFP coordinator for you, and she can make that introduction and sort of facilitate that process for you. CJ, I want to pick up on something that you just talked about, because you talked about in your advice, you talked about communication with couples. How does this change affect relationships?
Well, depending on the couple, depending on what they perceive is going to happen. Okay, so a piece that's a large portion of my work, working with the spouses of ill and injured soldiers, is not only providing the key information and the referral bit, but also my role is shifting the narrative from bitterness and unfairness, which I see a lot of, to one of more desired outcomes and gratitude. And it's amazing to see the families go from one narrative to the other narrative. The more information and the more planning goes into their transition. Okay, so the more information they have, the less the anxiety, the better the communication. But again, depending on the severity of the disability, that communication is not always possible. And so the Family Resource Center's mental health team, we also offer marital counseling. And again, to echo Louise's words, not to hesitate. If you're struggling as a couple, hence as a family, because the couple is the basis of the family. If the foundation, the couple, is not working, it's going to affect the whole dynamics of the family. So to echo Louise's word, reach out. The services are there, and there are mental health practitioners that can help with reestablishing a good communication within the couple. And all the other resources that I've already mentioned also reduce the anxiety. So, and I think another one of the key messages, having served myself for 25 years in the military, is that to encourage people to see that there is an actual life after the military, right? That it doesn't, your life doesn't stop. And at first I can see there's some resistance to that because there's an enormous sense of loss. But gradually people start seeing more information they have, that there is a life after the Canadian Armed Forces.
And one point I want to make, and you kind of brought it up a bit with the mobile, when we talk about changes in relationships, it's not just the change with your spouse. It could be changes with your kids. It could be changes with other family members. And Louise and CJ can help with those relationships, can help you, support you through that as well. So if the mobile is tilting in a different direction and you're noticing it's other relationships that are affected, you can still reach out for some assistance. CJ talked a little bit about some of the supports that are available through the mental health team. Do you want to talk about some of the other supports that are available through the VFP, Louise, for family members?
Absolutely. We provide enhanced information and referral services, like I said before. We can meet with the family and plan for them. We can map out needs and we can help access services that are required. when things get overwhelming, I can do the legwork. I can gather and provide information for you. You don't have to do that. If you don't know where to call, just let me know what you need. Sometimes just talking things through, you feel better and it gives you some clarity. Like I said earlier as well, I think of myself as a bridge. After you release, as long as you need. There's no time limit to our service. Sometimes everything's going great. I need help with this. Just call or email. Like Julie said, there's 32 of us across the country. So even if you're moving away, I can do a warm handover. I can give the Veteran Family Program Coordinator in the area that you're moving to a heads up that you're coming to the area. I can provide them with contact information and a date that you want them to reach out to you. And that way you don't have to, in the midst of moving and everything, don't have to think about that. We can put that in place before you leave. I have some great programs that are in place, and we're developing this one, the Transition 101 series. It's right now we're expanding that as needs arise and as we find out more what families are looking for. We have mental health first aid for the veteran communities. Some of these in-person trainings are on hold right now, of course, because of COVID, but mental health first aid for the veteran community is a 2-day training, much like physical first aid. It gives you skills to be able to help somebody who's having PTSD or OSI, anxiety, any of those things. Gives you the tools to be able to talk to them openly about it. It gives you tools to help to de-escalate panic attacks and things like that. It's opening piece of learning that I encourage everyone to take. I also have an online learning. It's called Operational Stress Injury Resources for Caregivers. So if you're a caregiver to a military member, and I have a link for this, it's in conjunction with the Royal Hospital, so it's fact-based. When CJ was talking about couples and the dynamics, we also offer a program called Couples Every Day. Again, this one's on hold because it's 5 days and 5 couples, and you go in and through group work with the couples and with the spouses, you learn how to cope. They give you coping mechanisms, they give you information. And the really good piece about this is that there's a follow-up system. So they track you for a year. You have a coach, and so as you're further and further away from those 5 days, that learning is still being reinforced, and they're checking in to see how things are going. So I think that's a wonderful piece. And there's also the Veteran Family Journal that CJ talked about. It's an amazing tool. I can't say enough about it. It helps to organize. It's full of information. It's a binder, so you can and all of these programs are available through the Veteran Family Program.
So Louise, you cut out a little bit there, so I want to just specify one thing. For the couples program, it's called COPE, C-O-P-E. So if that's something that's interesting to you, that's what the program is called. I just wanted to make sure that people sort of knew how to refer to it in case you had cut out for that.
Of course, yeah. Couples Overcoming PTSD Every Day is what COPE stands for, yeah.
Thank you. Absolutely. In terms of how to contact you, we're going to put your email address in the little blurb introduction. CJ is a family liaison officer, and in order to get in touch with CJ, you need to go through an intake process. So what we're going to do is we are going to, in the introduction as well, add the email address for our family advocacy coordinator. If you talk to the family advocacy coordinator, she will bring you through that intake process, and she can set you up with CJ or one of her colleagues in the family liaison team. One of the things I did want to mention is CJ is Francophone. So if you are concerned that you are not going to be able to get assistance because you don't speak English in Petawawa, that is not, don't let that be a hurdle, make the telephone call. Louise also speaks French, so please don't let that be the reason that you don't call. We are going to do our best to do that. Last question, and I'm going to give it to CJ. What can a flow do to help you support you through this process?
Well, I think the biggest piece is to address the anxiety that is so often paralyzing through the, remember, the families I work with are usually not the families that are going through the transition process smoothly, okay? They're encountering a lot of hurdles. And there's a lot of denial, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of anxiety. So part of my job is to help decrease that, that anxiety. And I've already talked about, you know, referral to various people that can provide information to decrease that anxiety. And other than working with, you know, moving from this bitterness to gratitude process, I think that one of the biggest pieces is during the transition process is to start it as early as possible. Soldiers and families that went through the transition process will tell you that the last 6 months of service are an absolute blur because the soldier has so many appointments to clear out of this, clear out of that, phase 1 medical, phase 2 medical, dental, you name it, that there's not always a lot of time to devote to planning. So trying to crunch it into the last 6 months once you get the release message is very anxiety provoking. So when people, you know, are going through their permanent category and they know that they're facing a medical transition 12 to 18 months down the road, start planning now. Start looking at what you want to do, where you want to go. Go get the information that is available out there, and don't hesitate to ask a lot of questions of a lot of people. You're going to ask a question of somebody, you know, in conversation, and they're going to provide you with a piece of information that's going to lead to another possible source of information. Ask the questions. It's hard when you're grieving and you're in somewhat denial and hoping for a 3-year retention to start planning for medical release and transition. But I encourage people very strongly to do so. And then that's why I refer people to Louise early on in the process so that she can actually pull open the bag of information that she has and allow the family to have access to that information as well.
Louise and I always talk about the fact that you don't know what you don't know. So if you're not having those conversations and you're not asking those questions, you don't know what you don't know. So go ahead and ask the questions.
Yes.
Everybody that we are talking to throughout this process, that is their number one thing, is please reach out. There are resources there, and they deeply regret when people get to the point when they've gone through the transition and they haven't taken advantage of resources that would have been there to help. Don't let that be you. I wanted to pick up one more thing. CJ, you had talked about that we are talking about the families that aren't going through a smooth transition. And there are plenty of families that go through the transition smoothly that may not be reaching out to you, that may not be reaching out to Louise, but it doesn't hurt to at least ask the questions and see if the program might be right for you. And you may not use it, but at least make sure, you know, have that conversation with Louise and see, you know, and then you can make that decision for yourself rather than missing out. Last question, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask this when I had two people with the expertise, whether you're going through it smoothly or whether you're noticing a couple more roadblocks, a couple more hurdles, what's your advice? What are the resources that you're going to encourage people to look at as they go through this process? Louise.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry, I didn't say a name.
That's okay. I didn't want to talk over someone. The earlier that you connect, the better. Even if you think that it's going to be an easy transition, and even if it is an easy transition, connect anyway. Signing up with the Veteran Family Program allows you to continue to access all of the services that the Military Family Resource has to offer, and you still maintain your priority as a military family. So even if you don't need emotional support, but you want your children in programming, or you know, you want to access programming, sign up. It's very simple. It really only takes about 15 minutes if you don't have a lot of questions and that kind of thing. It's very innocuous and it's not a pokey kind of intake. The other thing is, come and get your Veteran Family Journal as soon as you know that you're going to be medically releasing. I can't say enough about it. It's full of information. And when Julie said, you don't know what you don't know, it's very true. And you don't know to ask questions about things that you don't know exist. But the journal has tons of information about the supports that exist within the community and nationally as well. You get websites, you get phone numbers, and you can come in and ask, you know, what do you think about this? So I suggest just come in, meet, decide whether or not the program will be good for you. It's just nice to make the connection.
And sometimes you're going through and you've got a question and Louise has seen it before. So she already has that answer and it's going to save you a little bit of digging and a little bit of legwork. Or if she hasn't seen it, she at least can give you a place to start. Make the call. CJ, do you have any advice, any resources before we sign off?
I think I've said everything that I needed to say. Good luck to everyone though.
For those of you who are watching, we are going to be doing this Transition 101 series, and we're going to go through and have some extra parts. Our goal is to, like we said, to demystify this process for the family and provide them with information that they may not have. Our next session, that's going to be labeled Transition 101 number 2, is going to be talking with somebody from the Transition Center. I know a lot of people have questions about the Transition Center. What are the role? What are the services they provide? There's a wealth of services there, and this is your opportunity to ask those questions or to get some answers to those questions. So that is our next session. And if you have ideas, if you have suggestions, if you have questions for things that you would like us to address, we are totally happy to see if we can add another session on. So if there's something that you would really like to see as answer questions about, please give that feedback. Send a note to Louise and we would be happy to talk to you about that. Thank you all for joining us. Like we said, the contact information is in the comment section above or below, wherever this video is posted, and enjoy your day.
Thank you.